Hi guys, welcome to the Homework 6 Backside video. This one is on geometric series, which again relates to this summing formula. A couple really good questions I got last class is whenever you see the S, that just indicates that it's talking about the sum of the first n terms, right? That's why it's S sub n instead of U sub n. So again, just a reminder, when you see that giant S, if it's asking for something like that, that's the summing formula. The R still stands for common ratio, the N still stands for the term number, and the U1 stands for your first term. So everything else is pretty much the same, just that sum is a little bit different. So this is asking us to find the sum of the first 10 terms of the series below. If it's asking me to find the sum of the first 10 terms, I know that for both of these problems, my N is going to equal 10 because I am looking for the sum of the first 10 terms. So looking at this first one, we have 2 plus 6 plus 18. So I can think about that as 2, 6, 18, written out like that. We just see the addition signs because that indicates that we're summing them all together, which just means adding. So let's fill in what we know. So like I said, we know that N equals 10. U1 is my first term. My common ratio is 6 divided by 2, which is 3. Looking at this, we see 2 times 3 is 6. 6 times 3 is 18. So my common ratio is, once again, 3. Plugging it into my formula, I see that the sum of the first 10 terms, I'm going to draw in my fraction line, much like I would put it in on my calculator, is U1 is 2 times 3 to the 10th power minus 1. Keep in mind, notice that minus 1 is not in the exponent. For the summing formula, the minus 1 is outside the exponent in just the normal numerator, over R, which we know is 3, minus 1. So putting that into my calculator, I probably should have done this before. I apologize, but too late now. We're not going to turn back. We have 2 times 3 to the 10th power minus 1. Once again, that minus 1 is not in the exponent for the summing formula. Over 2, that gives me 59,048. And that's the sum of my first 10 digits. That one was pretty good. This next one's a little bit trickier. So we have 2793. Filling it in, we know that N equals 10. My first term is 27. My common ratio is a little bit trickier. So looking here, we see that 27 divided by 3 would give me 9. 9 divided by 3 would give me 3. But we need to write our common ratio in terms of multiplication, so we cannot write divided by 3. So I know that I can represent dividing by 3 as multiplying by 1 divided by 3, or 1/3. If you are having a hard time remembering that, you know that you're going to want a way to check, we can still do the same thing where we take our second term, which is 9, divided by our first term, which is 27, and that gives me a fraction of 1/3 too. So either way, if you want to look at it and see that it's dividing by 3, we represent that as multiplying by 1/3, or you could type it in your calculator like we could any other time and do 9 divided by 27, which will give you 1/3. So now we just plug it into our formula like usual. The sum of the first 10 terms, or S sub 10, equals my first term, which is 27, times R, which is 1/3 to the N. I'm going to put that in parentheses again just because I think it makes it easier with the exponent, to the 10th power, minus 1, over R, which is 1/3 minus 1. So I'm going to type that into my calculator. I will actually show you how to do that. I'm going to turn off the light so you can see it a little bit better. Good, so I'm going to put in my fraction bar right away. I have 27 times, I'm going to do one more set, 1/3 to the, what power? 10th power, minus 1. Notice how my 1/3 to the 10th minus 1 is also in parentheses. That's really important because we need to distribute the 27 to this 1/3 to the 10th power and the minus 1. If you didn't have the second set of parentheses, the 27 would just multiply by this exponent, and that's not what we want. We want it to multiply by both, so that was really important that we do that. Over R minus 1, which is 1/3 minus 1. That gives me this funky fraction, which is 29,524 over 729. I'm going to convert that to a decimal, which is approximately 40.499. So that's a perfectly acceptable answer too, either one of those. Once again, if you have any questions about those, please talk to me or Miss Avra. We'll have some time to review before the quiz on Tuesday. Yes, tomorrow. So let us know if you have any questions before then. Looking at the next section, we're just looking for the common ratio at first, and then next we're finding the sum of the first 8 terms, so then I know that n equals 8. So here I see that my common ratio is 3, because 4 times 3 is 12, or another way to think about it, 12 divided by 4 is 3. My first term is 4. What else am I missing? Oh, my n. So I'm looking for the sum of the first 8 terms, so my n is going to be 8. I use the formula at the top of my sheet because I am finding the sum of the first 8 terms. So I have u1, which is 4, times r, which is 3, to the n, which is 8, minus 1, over r, which is 3, minus 1. So, looking at that, I have 4 times 3 to the 8th power, minus 1, divided by 3 minus 1, which is 2. That gives me 13,120. And that's my answer. So we have r equals 3. That's the common ratio. Sum of the first 8 terms, 13,120. Looking at this one, we have another one that's decreasing. So I see that this is dividing by 2 each time, which means that I'm multiplying by 1/2. So once again, if we see divided by 2, we know that that means we're multiplying by 1 over 2. Or I could do it the other way and say 40 divided by 80 is equal to 1/2, and that would just show up right in my calculator. I see that my first term is 80, and once again, I'm finding the sum of the first 8 terms because that's what it tells me in my direction. So I'm going to take u1, which is 80, times 1/2 to the n, which is 8, minus 1 over r, which is 1/2 minus 1. I'm going to type that into my calculator. I'll put it up here so you guys can see it, just in case you want to practice. 80 times 1/2 to the 8th power minus 1. And look here, I just did exactly what I told you guys not to a second ago. And I need to add in that extra set of parentheses so that we can see that the 80 is being multiplied by both sides over 1/2 minus 1. That gives me 1,275 over 8. I don't really know what that means, I'm going to be honest, so I'm going to convert that to a decimal. And that gives me approximately 159.375. So we found our common ratio as 1/2, and our sum of the first 8 terms is 159.375. I'll scooch that over so you guys can see. If you have any questions about that, again, ask me or Ms. Avra, but now we're on to the last 2 ACT problems. So we have, what is the 7th term of the geometric sequence 1, -2, 4, -8? Unfortunately, this one we can't just multiply like we could the last couple because it's asking for the 7th term and not the 5th term. But I do know what my first term is, which is 1. I know that it's asking for the 7th term, which means that my n is going to be 7, and that just leaves my common ratio. -2 divided by 1 is -2, or 1 times -2 will give me -2, so I know that's my common ratio. The next thing to pay attention to is this question asking for the 7th term or the sum of the first 7 terms? So this is asking for the 7th term. We know that we're going to use the formula that looks like this. un equals u1 times r to the n minus 1. It's not asking for the sum, so we don't have to use that other formula. So now I'm going to fill in my numbers for this formula. u1 is 1, r is -2. Remember those parentheses, otherwise the negative is just going to stay outside of our exponent. To the n minus 1, so that's 7 minus 1. And remember that for this formula, the minus 1 does go in the exponent. So we have -2 to the 7 minus 1, and that gives us 64, which is answer choice E. I'll scooch it up a little bit so you guys can see. Let's look at this next one. So the first term in the geometric sequence below is -4, which it says right here. So what is the 6th term? So we have the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. So this is one where we can just multiply by our common ratio one more time and find out the 6th term. So let's figure out the common ratio. So we have 8 divided by -4, which is -2. Thinking about another way, 8 times -2 would give us -16. So if we take negative 64 times the negative 2, that gives me an answer of 128, and that's answer choice F. And it makes sense that it's positive, right? Because we see that each term is switching signs. Negative 64 was a negative, multiplied by a negative 2 would give us a positive number, right? Again, if you have any questions, ask me or Miss Avra. Otherwise, I know you guys are going to do great on this homework and on this quiz. So I'll see you tomorrow on Tuesday.